Welcome everyone to ResV. Coach Reslow here, and boy, do I have a treat for you today. I have Mr. Alan Segee, the head trainer, and the guy
Athletic
behind the
trainer,
guy,
athletic trainer, athletic
athletic
trainer.
trainer, the guy behind the guy behind the guy at Johnson and Wales University. Really stoked to have Alan. And what you need to know is that there is no ResV, there is no Coach Reslow without Alan Segee. Alan Segee was the trigger to all of this, and I'm super stoked to have him on. Alan, how are you?
I'm wonderful, and I know what you're talking about. And you were involved in volleyball long before I was the one who pulled the trigger. But I know what
Well,
you're saying. I know what
you
you're saying.
you could argue that Danny Green pushed me down this path,
Yep.
but
Yes.
I don't become the head men's volleyball coach at Johnson and Wales University without Alan Segee saying, "Hey, that guy took a bunch of little kids and went to the semifinals."
Until little kids. Who did you lose to? Did you lose to EP or Tollgate that year?
We lost to Tollgate that year with Josh Baker and James
Yes.
Rock, and they were
Yes.
they were big and physical. And it
Yeah.
is true. My team at that time, East Greenwich, we had no one over 6 feet tall.
Yes.
We had Dustin Baker setting. We had Mark Garlock on the pin. I mean, we played some good brand of volleyball, but Josh and James were too big for what we were
Yeah.
doing. But
Yep. Yep. And then you applied, and I remembered you when you came in. It couldn't have been that long after that game. And yes, the rest is history.
yeah, and I wasn't even going to apply. Like my mom reached out to me and was like, "Hey, you should apply for this job." I said, "Well, I already got a job. I work for Foldex Corporation, and I coached EG girls volleyball, EG boys volleyball, and I just finished my first season at Charahoe boys basketball." And she's like, "Oh, you should apply for this." I'll apply. So I applied, and I sit there, and I think it was you, Jamie Marcoux, and Sean Loro were in the room,
Yeah,
and
the room that isn't even there anymore. It's been
that's
those
that's
it
right.
was that tiny little conference room that we had that had no door.
Yeah, and John, I think maybe John Parenti was there too.
He
Um,
might have popped in, but
yeah,
he wasn't on the group. But yeah, it must
right.
have been Sean. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I
Wow.
remember, I remember talking a little bit about volleyball, my theory, but the only thing I remember talking about, like clear as day, is talking about how I was going to bring a pep band to men's volleyball,
Sure.
and, and that never happened. It didn't. It
Oh,
didn't get through.
the pep bands over the years have waned and flowed, and it all hinges on one guy who really wants to do it.
Right.
He'll graduate, and everything will fall off, and then we'll wait for the next guy because we've had years where there's a pep band in the stands. We've had years where there's one guy with a bugle in the stands, and then we've had a lot of years of nothing. So
So awesome stuff. That's the beginning. And if I don't get the head men's volleyball job at Johnson and Wales, I probably steer back towards basketball. Probably never become, the legend that I am in my own mind. And and certainly ResV doesn't exist, and you wouldn't be sitting in your Zoom chair with me right now. So
sure,
it's all you, man. All
it's
you.
all yep, yep. I get no royalties. It's unfortunate.
Well, ResV has to make some money first, dude.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
That's not happening.
Standard 5%. That's what I'm throwing out there.
Five. I thought it was three.
No, no, no. Went up.
Oh, went up. Inflation.
Inflation. Ah,
Oh, so dude, what you up to these days? Still holding down the fort at Johnson Wells.
I am, yes, yes. I am still the director of sports medicine at Johnson& Wales. I'm in my 25th year, so I had been there long before you came along, and I'm still there. Um, it's an interesting time right now in the world of athletic training. There aren't as many college athletic trainers out there, so
Hmm.
there's less and less of us. But
Yeah.
there some things don't change. Some things have evolved over the years, and we're still moving along.
You regret hiring me. I mean, that's
Never,
what everyone wants to
never,
know.
never,
That's not.
never, never.
I
And
was
I
expecting every day of my life.
oh no, I never. And all I can say is I'm probably one of the few people in the world who has seen you dive on a volleyball court.
It's true.
Um,
It's true. It
it's
doesn't happen.
so
Yeah,
I
and
it's those memories that make me not regret.
Did it
hiring.
take like $20,000 to fix the floor divot that I created when
Well,
I hit the
there
ground?
there wasn't. I wasn't talking about indoor. I was talking about on some sand. But yes, that divot. We had to take a minute to fix the
Big
divot in the
time.
sand. Yes.
Big time. So hey, let's talk about why you got into, because I know you coached volleyball. You were coaching at LaSalle for a little bit
Yeah, yeah,
with
yeah.
the boys side, and we definitely want to touch on that. But when did you know that you wanted to be in athletic training and follow that path?
So I believe it or not started in high school,
Hmm.
and what really happened was my freshman year. The gentleman who was the teacher of my health class, it was a he was the track coach, and he wanted to know if I would help him with some stuff. I don't know what he necessarily saw in me, but he just needed some help with the inventory, and that turned into me becoming the equipment guy with the football team,
Hmm.
and which led to me being the statistician and sometimes scorer for our basketball team. And that went on for 2 years. And then going into my senior year, the football coach said to me, "What are your thoughts about getting into athletic training?" He certainly
Hmm.
didn't phrase it that way. I don't think anybody phrased it that way back then. But when I was younger, the Kramer, which is just a company that sells medical supplies and sports medicine supplies, truly, they used to do summer camps for high school students who were interested in athletic training. So I went to this camp. It was like a 4-day camp in it was at North Adams State, which that is no longer North Adams State. It's now something MCLA, Mass College of Liberal Arts. So
Oh,
I went up there, and you get a crash course in all things athletic training. And I came back and started taping ankles. And I was very poor at it to start. And just as with everything else, you do it a lot and you get better and better at it.
right.
And my senior year of high school, I decided that my high school needed an athletic training room, so I made one. I hijacked this
Didn't.
closet that no one was using, and I moved the tables in there. And during football season, the guys who needed to get taped would just come down the hall, and they would hop on the table, and I was taping. It was probably 30 ankles a day. It seemed like the line
Wow.
would never end. Oh yeah, they would just keep coming. Well,
Yeah.
let me no, yeah, it was probably about 30 ankles because it was probably about 15 guys. They'd come in and just tape them and send them out, and it just went from there. And then I knew at that point that's what I wanted to do, so I um, started just investigating different programs. I ended up at Rhode Island College for a variety of reasons, but the big reason was I met Dr. Kathy LaQuali, who is now a professor at Bridgewater State. She
Hmm.
was the head athletic trainer at Rick at the time. And all of the other programs basically said that you would spend your first 2 years just in classes and you weren't going to be working with any athletes. And I had just spent all those years in high school with
Right.
athletes.
Doing the job.
Yeah. Yeah. And she said, if you come here, you're going to be a big fish in a little pond. And that's what happened. So I ended up there, and the rest is history. I spent my time at Rick, and just moved on from it. Just kept
Yeah.
going and going and going. So
Yeah, and you killed two of my questions in your introduction there, because I was going
all
to
right.
ask, like, when was the first time you taped an ankle? We got that
Yeah,
part, and then
it
the
was high
second,
school.
high school, which is wild to me. I love that you created your own room to work
Yeah.
with. I mean, that's so cool, so cool.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't anything, you know, grandiose, but basically I had a table in there, and we started storing all of the tape and different things in there, and it just it just went from there. It was yeah, it was seems like a million years ago now, but yeah.
And did the teachers and the administration, were they like, all right, yeah, go for it, buddy?
No, the teachers weren't really happy. Well, no, most teachers didn't even know. I mean, this was something that happened after school, so most of the teachers
Right.
didn't even know. The department that actually owned the room that I commandeered, she was a little unhappy, but then she very, I don't want to say quickly, but then when she realized that something was at least happening in the space, she was better about it. The
Hmm.
principal was not a fan and um, bolted the door shut.
No
But
way.
yes, but the vice principal, who turned into a great mentor of mine for many, many years, the vice principal was a man named Robert Salisbury. He convinced the principal that it was a good idea, and things started happening. I owe a lot to Coach Salisbury, and a lot of other coaches there. Jim Dunn was the football coach. I would not be where I am if he hadn't
Yeah, yeah.
suggested things, and yeah. So
You're
yeah,
causing you're as a high school student, you're causing wars between administration people.
they fought their own battles. I was going to class all day, and then I was just going in there and taping ankles in the afternoon.
And
It
then the
was
other question I was going to line up for you is how many ankles do you think you've taped in your lifetime?
oh
And
God,
millions? Are we
thousands,
in the millions?
thousands. I don't know if we're in the millions, but I will say that a member of the great 2017 volleyball team at Johnson and Wales, she asked me one day if I thought I could tape an ankle blindfolded, and I had a hoodie, and I grabbed the hoodie and I pulled it down over my head, and I was able to tape somebody blindfolded.
That's
So
awesome.
that tells you reach a point where you can, when you need to see, you just go. So
Yeah. And quite frankly, in the training rooms, that I've been in, certainly at Johnson& Wales, yours, and then others when I was an athlete as well, college at Moravian College. There's a lot going on in those training rooms. There's a lot of activity. There's all sorts of stuff going on. So, I'm sure you're probably talking to somebody, taping an ankle, giving other advice or other
yeah,
direction. Like
yeah.
there's tons of things happening.
You learn to multitask, because at different times of the year, and different times of the day, it gets crazier, and then things slow down. But right now in the fall, it's very busy, and
Showtime. Yeah.
you're taping somebody, and you're answering a question from somebody next to you at the same time, and you're trying to make sure that people are doing the right things behind you. And so yeah, it's always a hub of activity, whether it's the people who legitimately are in there because they have an injury, or whether it's the people who are just coming in to socialize, because that happens
Right.
too.
Right.
Is
Oh yeah, we're gonna get
oh,
to that. We're gonna get to that down the line. But so I know you went on to get your master's and all that stuff, and you did all the things you needed to do. And then did you work for Providence College first with the baseball
I
team?
did.
Is that the first
I,
one? Yeah.
I did. Yeah. So um so I graduated undergrad. I moved to Florida for a year and did an internship down there, which was actually also where I did my first gig as a volleyball coach. Then
Oh,
I,
didn't know
I
that.
came back, and I was working at a physical therapy clinic in Rhode Island. I did that for about a year and a half. And then what I did mention was when I went to that clinic at North Adams State, I met the man who was I believe his title was the coordinator of sports medicine at Providence. Is a man named Ken Wolford.
Hmm.
Who was another great mentor of mine. So Ken, I saw him in 1995 at the Athletic Trainers Conference, and we were just talking. And I do love telling the story. We're standing there, and we were at some sort of a social event, and all of a sudden he turns to me and he says, "Have you got your master's?" And I said, "No." And then he turns to the gentleman next to me who I didn't know, and he says, "Do you need a GA?" And the guy said, "What?" And so now we start talking, and these were two best friends who have known each other for, I hate to say it, it's probably 60 years. And that was how I ended up moving everything to Cleveland, Ohio to get my master's.
Wow. Yeah.
Because the gentleman, a man named Jack McNeely, who's a fantastic athletic trainer, he said, "Well, I don't need a GA this year. I've got somebody. But if you want it next year, you can have it based on his recommendation." So I was like,
Hmm.
absolutely. Was planning on going back to my clinic. And then in August, Jack calls me and he left a message. So I call him back and I said, "So you must need a GA." And he goes, "Why would you say that?" I'm like, "Why else would you be calling me?" So he said, "If you want it, you can have it, but I need you here in 2 weeks." So I put in notice, and I packed up my little hatchback and drove to Cleveland, Ohio. And I spent a year there, and got my master's. It was a fantastic experience. But when I came back, I was working at that clinic, and it wasn't, I wasn't the same person, and that clinic really just needed a pair of hands. They didn't need anybody.
Sort of outgrew it,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then things happened at Providence. Yes, I did go to Providence. Things happened at Providence. They were cutting their baseball team. They
Oh,
were making, yes, they dropped their baseball team in 1999. At the time, they made across the board cuts. They were cutting scholarships in just about every sport, and they were downsizing a great deal. And they announced that they were going to be eliminating one of their athletic training positions.
hmm.
And so this was in early in 98. So I get told, he calls me because one of the coaches was moving on to greener pastures, and she got a bump up. And I think just how things were at Providence kind of facilitated that. But her husband was one of the athletic trainers. So he was leaving.
Hmm.
So Ken called me and said, I have an opening. If you want it, you can have it, but you're going to be the person that gets eliminated in May
Oh
of
gosh.
99.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I couldn't not take that opportunity. So I went to Providence. I worked swimming and diving for the end of the first term, and then I was with baseball through the spring. We ended up making the regional final that year. It really was one of the more magical stories in
Yeah.
sport that year, and
Yeah.
it was unfortunate they cut the team. They lost a lot of guys who immediately transferred.
Right, of course.
They had a bunch of seniors who were still there, and now all of a sudden they got this new guy who, they didn't know who I was, who's now
Right.
working with them. The great John Rock, who is still at Providence College, had been with baseball his entire tenure there, and they moved him to hockey because that's where he was going to be after they eliminated baseball. So I
Right. Right.
it killed John to not be there, but it was my great fortune to be with that group, and it's wonderful because I'm still in touch with a lot of those guys. It was
Yeah.
truly a magical experience. It really was.
Yeah, I remember hearing that, I'd forgotten that they had cut it that year, but I remember hearing that they went on a run. Like they just caught lightning in a bottle and just was going. Really
Yeah,
cool stuff.
yeah. I mean, we won the Big East, which alone was amazing because the Big East was not, in any way a bad league. We
No.
Dame, it was quite a run through that tournament, and then we got sent to Florida State for the regional, and we fought through that and ended up losing to Florida State, who they didn't win that year, but they went very far,
Mm.
and we ended up losing to them. And it was actually remarkable because the Florida State fans, who are the baseball fans of Florida State, are rabid, and they
Mm.
are intense, and they are crazy. And in the game prior to us facing them, they were over cheering for us. They were
Because
in
they
the
wanted to
stand.
see you guys.
Yeah, and it was just remarkable. And it was also funny because then, as soon as we won, they all waved and they walked over to the other side of the field because they were sorry, we're cheering against you. But it was, yeah, it was
uh,
it was it was remarkable.
it's always wonderful when you get involved in something like that and it takes off and you have this magical experience. And like you said, you get to make those friends that end up being friends for life almost because you've shared something that's just unbelievable. So really cool stuff there. And then did you pivot to Johnson and Wales from there?
Yes, almost immediately. It was I left Providence in, well, after we got back from the regional. That was pretty much it. That was my last day. And I ended up at Johnson and Wales. I mean, I was applying everywhere, and I had applied and was talking to the gentleman at Maine,
Hmm.
and so that was on my radar. And then Jamie Marcoux, who at the time she was Jamie Murray,
Hmm.
um, reached out to me. Jamie was the first athletic trainer at Johnson and Wales, and things were expanding, and they had approved an assistant. So she reached out to me. She and I had gone to college together. She played volleyball at Rick when I was there.
Hmm.
Jamie a long time, and they needed somebody. She reached out to me. I interviewed, and the funny thing is, I didn't accept the job right away Ironic because I've been there so long, but I was holding out for the main job because I wanted to stay D1.
Mm.
And I didn't get the call back from Maine until a week after I started at Johnson& Wales. They finally called me back and I
Took so
said,
long.
"I'm sorry, you
Mm.
didn't get back to me." And I suppose the rest is history. I've been at Johnson& Wales ever since. Through it,
Is there a vast difference between D1 and D3 in
in
the
some
training
respects,
world? Yeah.
yeah, in some respects. The probably the biggest difference is just the staffing. You have more staff,
Mm.
so at the D3 level, you're responsible for more teams and you're responsible for
Gotcha.
more athletes,
Mm.
but you don't travel. You don't see them outside of their seasons. When they're in season, you see them all the time. When they're out of season, you don't. At the
Mm.
Division 1 level, they go all year. You're with that one team all year long, good and bad.
Mm.
I mean, at when I was at Providence, and even when I was at Cleveland, because Cleveland State was Division 1 when I was the GA, you're on call 24/7. You'll
Wow.
I would get calls from just random calls because somebody didn't feel well, and things come up, and it's amazing what they call you for. So
Yeah.
in that regard, it's different. At Providence, I was the baseball guy, and if I had started earlier in the year, I would have been with baseball the whole time. I would have
Right.
covered swimming and diving, but I would have been with baseball through everything. Here, it's last year when we had a full staff, I had volleyball, I had ice hockey, and I had baseball. So you don't see the overlap. You don't have the
Right.
overlap with one. You're just with one team.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as
Okay.
far as
Cool.
medical care, it's not different. I
It's
don't
the
think
same stuff.
it's the same stuff. You see the same stuff, and we try to do a Division 1 model as far as the referrals to the doctors and everything else.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so in that regard, it's very similar.
Ah, gotcha. Gotcha. So actually, this just sparked a thought in my head too. Since you've been doing this so long, which by the way is a good thing.
Yeah.
Has the modern athlete differed or compared to the athlete that you started working with back in those years
Hmm.
ago?
Well, some things have changed. I mean, in some respects, there are some things that are fads that
Mm.
come through, whether it be in lifting or in training or in something like that. I mean, probably the first one that jumps to mind is years ago, everybody was on creatine.
Mm.
Everybody. Do you hear about creatine much anymore? There are still people who are doing it correctly who still take it. But for a
Mm.
while, everybody needed creatine.
Mm.
There are things like that come and go, and some are very successful, some aren't. So there are some things that have changed, but the injuries are still the injuries,
Right.
and there are some certain things that have come along that are great treatments that are still sticking around, and some that have left. When I was in school and when I first started, everybody was getting an ultrasound. It was, if you came in
Oh.
and you had any sort of injury, we were doing an ultrasound on you. And it's not a diagnostic one. We weren't like looking for a baby. A therapeutic one where you're treating somebody. So that, we don't do much ultrasound anymore.
Hmm.
And there's a lot more hands-on than there was years ago. There's a lot more things that are like we're touching more people than we used to therapeutically.
Hmm.
Things come and
Yeah,
go.
the fad that jumps out at me, and I don't. There's two of them that I don't. I mean, you don't have to comment on them if you don't want to, but the special tape, that you put on
Oh
different
yeah,
muscle
yeah,
groups, and then the
sure.
cupping. Like those are the two that I'm like, oh, that was not around when I was an athlete.
No,
Uh,
no.
you know,
Well, the KT tape, we can all thank Kerry Walsh for that because,
you're right.
well,
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
true. I mean,
Yeah.
she won a bunch of gold medals with that strategically placed, and um, we have a lot of people who think that, oh well, if I put it on, I'm going to win a gold medal.
I'm Kerry
Uh,
Walsh.
yes. And the cupping has become huge. We started doing it, and there are some things that we see great results with it, and we will use it. But unfortunately, there are a lot of kids who just come in and they're like, "Well, I need to get cupped," and we have to ask, "Well, why? Why do
Why?
It's not that we're saying the best course is you need to be cupped. They're coming in
Yeah.
saying I need to be cupped." And I
Yeah.
think it's just because they want, they want to look like Michael Phelps. They want to have the dark circles, which
That's
doesn't
what I was
over
gonna say. Kerry Walsh did the tape, Michael Phelps is the Cubs.
Phelps is the cover. Yeah. So yeah,
So
the KT tape, I won't really comment on that because I don't have much experience with it. There are people who swear by it, and there are some applications that I think are beneficial, and that like anything else, it isn't going to make you a gold medalist. There's a lot of other factors. So
yeah, I'm wondering if the next athlete that wins 4 or 5 gold medals in an Olympiad, if he or she wears something just sort of weird just to see what happens and see if it becomes like
uh-huh. Yep,
like
it's true.
whoever the next guy is or gal, they decided to wear a band-aid on their right calf, and now that's the
Yep,
way to make sure your blood flow to
yep.
your calf. It's
Yeah, no,
right.
my Band-Aid budget will go through the roof. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
It's funny. So we talked about earlier on a little bit about being the hub of the athletic world, and it's absolutely true. I as a college coach at Johnson and Wales, I often remarked or thought about how athletes tend to be in the training room longer than they do on the court, because it becomes a social area, right? Like there's definitely guys and gals that are getting work done, but there's also the rest of the team hanging out, chatting.
Yep.
Is that something that's been around forever for you, or is that something that's, and how do you deal with that? I mean, obviously you're the Pied Piper there. You're running the whole show. So
Well, it isn't just me. I certainly have a staff, and
mhm.
it's we've rotated over the years, but there are days where we have to kick people out, and you get dirty looks because, well, I've been sitting here every day for the past month, but we need the space, and it gets overwhelming. More often than not, it isn't a bad thing. People come in and they're just being social, and for the most part, everybody's having a good time, and it isn't a bad thing as long as no one's getting in the way, or causing us to not have, it's not delaying somebody from getting a treatment. And it's funny over the years, there are some teams that just socially come in more than others. We have two teams that really spend a lot of time in there, one male team and one female team, and there's a lot of different reasons, but they part of it for both of them is the social aspect for sure.
Yeah. I remember, doing tours for recruited athletes and making sure that I hit that training room stop, hoping to see you obviously because I love
Mhm.
the presentation that you gave, but the other part of your staff were very good too. I wouldn't say they're not. But we always ended with, "Hey, you're going to spend a lot of time in here," and quite frankly, a team's going to hang out in here a lot. So this is
Yeah,
this is the
yeah.
spot.
I mean, your team did. It's a part of that was because of the locale of their locker room.
That's right.
They would
Yeah.
they would come in, and you weren't necessarily a big meeting guy
Mm,
at times. Like there are other teams that you don't see as much of because their coach, there are pre-practice meetings. So, that played a role for you. The kids would come down, and you also used to practice kind of late at night, or later in the day, I should say, not late at night.
right. Right.
So, there was less social activity going on in the gym.
Mhm.
There's a lot of factors as to why a team hangs out. Whichever team is the locker room directly across from the training room is
The
guaranteed to spend the most
Yeah,
time in
it's
there.
a
Yeah.
nice flow right to it.
Yeah, they just yep.
And the other thing too, and again, you don't have to tell any stories you don't want to, but you have probably heard more hearsay, more stories, more
Yeah.
crazy things from, because
Yeah.
kids gravitate and they talk about what they talk about and they don't even consider that you're there.
Yeah.
I would
Well,
suspect.
I'm
And
old.
next, yeah, next thing you know, you're the pulse of the entire athletic department because you know what's
Well,
going on.
sometimes that has certainly happened over the years. We certainly do catch the scuttlebutt, and you're right. There are times when student athletes say more than they probably should, not realizing
Mhm.
that I know what they're talking about.
Yep.
But no, most of the time it's just a good social atmosphere.
But I will say this, that
Oh,
no, this is important, and this this is important, that you have almost more direct contact with athletes than the coaches do. You see them. often. You see them all the time. And, quite frankly, and I know that you've given advice, you've helped kids. I think that's a huge role. And it's one of the reasons I wanted you on the show because, a lot of the people that watch the ResV stuff are all guys and gals that have aspirations of playing in college and what that looks like and how that's going to, go forward. I was like, man, I got to get Segee on because Segee can express what that's like in the training room and that you have support from all different people, not just your coach.
Oh yeah,
Certainly I give information and whatnot, and I care about the kids that I recruited and I want them to do well. But you see thousands of kids every year and
yeah.
make these relationships.
Yeah, it's just different. I wouldn't necessarily say that we see more of them because there are plenty of kids who don't get hurt and do not need
Mhm.
any extra care who we never see at all.
Mm,
But you're seeing them every day for 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
right.
So it's just, and you're also traveling with them, which we're not necessarily, that adds a factor that is incredibly different. I mean, a great example is the year you went to California
Mm,
and I went with you. You develop a closer relationship when you travel with a team. And I
yeah.
only made that one trip, but it's just a different relationship. And there are different expectations for both of us
Mm,
because when the students come to see us, it's because something's wrong. And when they're dealing with you, they want to present that nothing's wrong, that
mm,
they're able to do everything that a coach is asking of them.
mhm,
And for us, they're coming in and we're hearing, well, I can't do that because, I pulled my quad.
right.
And, it's so we're getting different ends of things. But yeah, you over the years you get very close to some of the athletes. It's interesting. There are still a handful of students from the 99 teams from when I first started who I'm
Mm,
still in touch with. And I was joking just last weekend at our Hall of Fame because one of our student athletes who graduated 6 years ago uh, called me. He texted me because he had hurt himself, and he texted me saying, "Can you get me into the ortho? I hurt myself." And I'm like, You realize you're never getting rid of some of these people, you know." Um, but and it's you have some former players who I have texted randomly for different reasons
mhm,
and I stay in touch with, and it's you the relationship you build when you're in the training room, and it's good and bad. And a lot of coaches over the years will say it, and a lot of teams will say it, that there's a family aspect to it, because you certainly have days when you're caring for these people and you just want to strangle them and you've had enough of them every day,
right, right,
and then there are other days when you're like the mama bear and you're ready to kill anybody who says anything bad about them. So
right.
there's quite a spectrum of things.
Yeah, and maybe that's another way to pivot into this next topic, which is talk about the persona that you have in the training room. Because you've shared with me a couple of times that you come off a little gruff
Oh
initially
yeah.
because you figure again, you correct me, but you figure that you told me that you figure if they can handle you gruff, that means they're really hurt.
Well, yes, in a lot of respects, you want the training room to be someplace that people can go, but you don't want people to get too comfortable going there. And uh, yes, I listen. I know my truth. I am a grouchy old man. I know, and I've been a grouchy old man for 25 years now. But and there are certainly some cases where there are kids who will not come to me because I'm the crappy old man.
Mhm,
But there are others who do. It's when I was in college, I did an internship at Brown. And I remember I was talking to the Frank George, who was the head athletic trainer at Brown for 40 years. We were in there and he was talking about how somebody in the Ivy League, their training room had TVs and workstations and all these other things. Now, this was back in the 90s.
wow.
And he said, "We're not doing that." And I remember thinking, oh, but he was right. He said, "You put a TV up and you've got kids who are going to sit there all day and watch TV. You don't
Right.
want them getting that comfortable in the training room. I've had Johnson Wales athletes say, "Why can't we get a TV in here?" I'm like, "Well, what are you going to watch?" I mean, we used to have a radio in the room, and the Johnson Wales training room is a bit of a vault between the concrete and everything else.
Right.
And at the time, we got two radio stations for sure, and we might have been able to get a third, and nobody could agree on what we were listening to.
That's the problem, right? Yeah.
That's the problem. You know, you'd have
Yeah.
all these people coming in. Why can't we put on our music? And I'd say, because you're leaving in 15 minutes. That's why it's my music. That's I'm listening to.
I'm the one who's staying here
I'm
right
the
now
one who's
for
staying here.
hours.
Yes, I mean, and Jamie and I, when we were working in there, you know, we had our station on, and that was what we listened to. So yeah.
But
So getting back to what you said, yeah, I mean, you don't want people to get too comfortable. And when I say that, you know, you get close to some of the athletes, you get close to some of the athletes because they are in there for legitimate reasons, and you get close to the kids who work in athletics, and you get close to the kids who play more than one sport, and you know, you get close to the kids who, I hate to say it, have those significant injuries that are in every day, and they need more treatment than just, you know, hey, I'm kind of sore today. So it's how it is. You don't want it too
yeah,
welcoming, but you want it welcoming enough.
right. And at the same time, you see these kids when they're oftentimes at their highest level of frustration, right? You know, you have a bad
Oh,
injury, you want to be out there, you cannot be. And so like
yeah,
a supportive word from you, or hey, you know, it's going to be okay, can really go a long, long way. Like, you know,
yeah,
especially when you are the grumpy old man and you're like, listen,
yeah.
because I've
No,
seen you break character. I've seen the heart of gold behind the facade. I've seen you do it. And you kind of just go, hey man, it's gonna be all right. And that's huge when you have the gruff old man most of the time. It means you actually you give
yeah.
them a
Um,
pathway forward, which is awesome.
uh, I'd like to think that. I'm trying to think of a time that somebody who truly thought of me as just being a grouchy old man thought that way. But I appreciate you saying that. You
I've
know,
seen it. I've seen it.
I can't say that it doesn't happen. So
And you've done it to me. You know, even when I was even coaches need advice
well,
sometimes. You know, and it's like, dude,
we were at Mulligan's at the time, and you weren't passing well.
don't discount our Puerto Rico trip. That Puerto
Well,
Rico trip
we'll always have Puerto Rico, which
in a hurricane.
for your fans, the women's, this must have been in 2010.
2010.
We
Yep.
went
That was the
to
year.
Puerto Rico. You were an assistant coach with the women's team.
Mhm.
We flew to Puerto Rico because the great Kathy Bravo was a
Mm,
senior. She was
that's
from
right.
Puerto Rico. She wanted to go. She wanted to make that trip. So we flew down there. We landed. We weren't there 2 days, and a hurricane slammed into the island. And you and I spent 2 days trapped in a hotel room.
In a
Thank
swaying hotel.
oh, thank God the hotel, the Wi-Fi and the electricity didn't go out. Thank God. And then we had a couple of games, and then we flew home. We landed at Logan, and the same hurricane hit New England. We were the only people to get hit by a hurricane twice.
And
Yep.
don't forget that, you know, you had a tough injury there too. One of our girls got hurt and you had to go to the hospital.
Had to go to the hospital in,
Oh,
yeah, she broke her foot
yep.
in warm-ups.
Mhm.
She was our, well, she was, we were running a 6-2, I think, that year,
She was one of our
and
setters, yeah.
we
And then we
were our
instantly
setter.
went to a 5-1.
Had to go to a 5-1, and
Yeah.
she was only a freshman, but she was
Yeah.
at the time the more consistent setter, and in warm-up she breaks her foot, and off we go to the ER. And that's somebody who I'm still in touch with. At least once or twice a year I'll still talk to her, because we reminisce about the fact that we got to this ER and no one was speaking English, and
Mm,
it's a struggle when you're in that situation. And
yeah.
we got in, and Kathy was with us to start, so we at least got in and we got checked in, because Kathy obviously spoke Spanish. And we sat down in the waiting room, and we were there a long time watching soap operas in that we didn't understand. And they were riveting drama that we just couldn't take our eyes off of. And thank God the doctor was bilingual, because we would have been in trouble if he hadn't. But
Yeah. Oh
yep,
my
that
gosh.
poor kid, because then she hopped around for the rest of that week. I give her a lot of credit because
It's a
she was
tough
hurt.
time, tough
That was a
spot.
tough
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
when you when you get injured, quite frankly, in a faraway land. Like I actually that happened to me. Like I when I was playing basketball at Moravian, we did an Ireland tour and we're in Belfast. We play a game of basketball and someone breaks my nose, knocks it clear off my face. And so we're going to the hospital in Belfast and at the time it looked war torn. Like it looked beat to shit.
God.
And we're just sitting here, the doc, and I'll never forget this. So I'm sitting there, my nose is a little bit cocky. It wasn't off my face, that happened later, but it's a little bit dented and it's bleeding a lot. And we finally get to see the doctor, and I'm just sitting there, I have my head down and going, I don't, I'm in Belfast, Ireland. I'm as far away from home as I could be in my world, and I'm hurt pretty good. And the doc walks in, and the doc's smoking a cigarette. And he walks in, and he looks at me and goes, "You drink beer?" And like my coach is right next to me. And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, have 4 Guinness, you'll be fine." And then he sent us home. That was it. That was it. And I was like, holy Christmas. What is going on right now?
The medicine of the area. That's what you do, I suppose.
That was so wild.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because again, you're far away. You're far away from home. You're dealing with a totally different situation, different
Yeah.
brand of medicine, different cultures, sometimes
Oh,
different languages, and it's pretty wild, pretty
yep.
wild. So, and you've had a couple of those. I mean, you
Yeah.
go travel all the time. Is that the biggest one? Was that the one that was the
Oh,
craziest, or have you
no,
had some?
no,
And
no.
again,
I
you don't
mean,
have to share anyone's personal story,
it
but
was a crazy situation. But
yeah.
I mean, the the worst fracture I've ever dealt with was on a distance trip. We were
Was it?
the spring break trip, yeah, and that injury was horrible.
Hmm.
And I mean, I've had basketball was on the West Coast one year, and in warmups, a kid badly sprained his ankle. And it was the same situation. You're trying to get around, and
Yeah.
this was all pre-Uber, so you're in a cab, and it's yeah. So things happen everywhere, and you roll with it, and you know you just you
Well,
just
the other thing that's really cool. I mean, we never want to see it, right? As a human being, you never want to see another human being really get hurt.
yeah,
But I remember being, a women's basketball game. We had a young lady get hurt. It was terrible. But what was fascinating for me, because I was on the broadcast with John
yeah,
Parenti at the time,
yeah,
is to see you, Matt Roach, and the whole crew. Who you guys are jovial. You're fun. You're fun to hang out with. A lot of good. And then Serious Face came on, and you guys went into action, and
yeah.
it was pretty cool to see that. Now, granted,
That was horrible.
tough situation. Yeah, but
That was number two on the bad fracture list.
yeah, yeah, and
The irony of that injury, the one where you were on the broadcast, was I wasn't the athletic trainer for women's basketball that year.
mm,
Um, and I think that was when we had a full staff. So I was with men's basketball,
mm,
and Jillian Withington, who's been at Johnson Wells 20 years in the athletic
mhm,
training room, she was the athletic trainer with women's basketball. And the doctor was in that night for clinic,
mm,
and she had somebody that needed to see the doctor. And she said, "Can you go out and just cover the women's game while I'm in with the doctor?" And in those 10 minutes, that's when that injury occurred.
happened.
And it was
Yeah,
like, oh my gosh, of all things, and to one of the greatest people
yeah,
that we've ever,
wonderful
oh,
student
just
athlete. Yeah, really
fantastic.
cool.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
yeah, fortunately you practice when those emergencies happen. So fortunately everything went the way it's supposed to.
it
But
looked clockwork. I mean, it looked
oh,
really good from that aspect. I mean, obviously
yeah,
it's not fun, but
yeah,
everyone went serious and everyone did their job and everyone was moving fast. And
yeah,
I don't think I don't know if you keep in touch with her, but I know I remember speaking with her later on. She's like, I was just grateful that I knew someone, when you're in that moment, you need a friendly face that's
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
help you out.
yeah. Oh, and we still laugh about the fact that we got her splinted, and she was lying there, and I like kind of like leaned over her and like put my arm on the other side of her, and she's talking to me, and she's like, why are you so close to me? And I was like, oh, nothing, no, just chatting. And then she realized, and she's like, you don't want me to see my leg, do you? And I was like,
Yeah.
you are not looking at your leg. Because
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was, I mean, it that was one of those situations where we had to kind of make up a splint, because yeah, it was,
It
yeah.
was that
That, yeah,
tough a fracture.
yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
yep. The cameras cut away is what I'll say. We weren't staying on us. Yeah.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Yeah, but yeah. Poor kid.
Uh,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. But so like what's going on? What's the future hold for you, Alan Segee? I
I
mean,
I don't
gonna keep
know.
grinding along?
I'm still grinding, and I do still love it. And it's been a challenge this year. We're down staff, which is, like I said, kind of
Always a
happens to everybody in athletic training. Um, but we're getting through, and it's different, but grinding it out is probably the right way to put it. So
hmm.
I'm
What's
still playing
the
volleyball, so that's
Yeah, well, we didn't even get to
something.
talk about your volleyball stuff. I mean, you were at LaSalle for a little bit, right?
I
And
Yes, so yeah, I coached in Florida for a year, or for one season really,
mm,
with a great coach who taught me a great deal. And then I came back here, and I was the assistant boys coach at LaSalle for about 10 years, 11 years. And we did the girls for 3 years. We won two Division II titles. That was back when LaSalle was we were the only LaSalle team in Division II.
see,
Um,
even you are a better coach than I. I've yet to win
false,
a championship.
false. False. And I say false because the team that won with the boys, we had some prodigies on that team. I mean, people in the volleyball world in Rhode Island know who Rob Rock is.
Right. Yep.
He was our starting setter, and we didn't teach Rob a thing. He came in, and he just had hands, and he knew what to do. It was
I'm gonna
remarkable.
do this, coach.
He just
You
knew.
do it.
Yeah, it was. Rob was something else. He was just brilliant. Um,
Mm.
so to say that we were better, it was really, we had some good kids. The women's team that we won with, that was some good coaching, but that was more the personalities. We had an interesting group that year. But
That's one of the challenges of being a coach. It's more
it is,
personalities often than it is teaching
it is,
skills or having X's and O's.
it is. And I have to give credit to Kristen Ward, who was the head
Mm.
coach, who dragged me in. She's she hasn't coached. She started a family, so she
Mhm.
stepped away from coaching. But she was coaching club for a while as her daughters came
Mhm.
up through. Um, and she really is one of the great fundamental coaches. She had a lot of success coaching, the younger kids
Yeah.
in club, and then obviously she wanted to move up with her daughters. But I think if given a choice, I think the club administrator would want her to stay with the young kids, and because she was great at teaching just the fundamentals, and just
The fundamentals are huge. I mean, I
uh,
mean, I know for a fact that that's not my wheelhouse. Like my wheelhouse as a coach is doing the next level stuff, the X's and O's, the strategy, all that stuff. I enjoy that part. That's why I had Brian Garapi as my assistant for as long as I did, because he is great at fundamentals like that.
yeah,
But you can't do anything without him. So
yeah.
you got to have them, and they got to be taught well.
We've had that conversation. There are a lot of teams that they can block and they can hit, but they have got nobody who can pass the ball. And
Think of a
it
couple right now. Yeah.
I can think of one. And it just, if you're not it for us, if you weren't reading the block well, forget about reading the hitter. You've got to see what the block is in front of you and where you've got to go,
Yeah.
and I don't think we
Well,
ever had a game where we weren't screaming that you were staring at high knees. That used to be our line. Why are you staring at high knees? If you can't see the hitter, you're not doing us any good.
That's right. That's right. And the other thing too is if you can't pass, it doesn't matter. Like it just
It
doesn't,
does.
you know. Yeah, like
If you
you're getting served off the floor. You can have really great, offensive system you're running where there's tempo everywhere, but you can't pass, can't run it.
yeah,
And quite
yeah,
frankly, if you can't pass and you can't run your middle, you become so one optional.
uh-huh.
It makes it real easy to defend. And next thing you know,
Yeah.
you're losing 25-15.
Makes it
So
very easy for block to sit up on the other side when they know where the ball is going.
that's my favorite part when someone gets caught. I mean, it's not my favorite part, but I do find it entertaining when you're watching two teams go at it and one team gets caught in a rotation. All they can do is send it to the left, and basically the opposing coach just moves their blockers and puts them right there before they even serve.
Yep.
It's like,
Yep.
oh well, this is over. That's the end of that.
Just move it over, and
Yep.
you just have your defensive player, and on the left side, just step in because the center is eventually going to dump because that's their
Mhm.
only other
Yep.
option.
That's right. We played a team in club 2 years ago now, Northeast, out of Connecticut, and they had two premier outsides, like D1 level guys that were going
Yeah,
to go, next level, but they had nothing else around them. So
yeah,
all they did was set the left side over and over and over again. And, we beat them once and then they beat us two other times. Uh, but all I did was I took my blockers and just put them over
yeah,
there and said, all right, but either he's going to win or we're going to win. We'd
yeah,
like to think that we could win if we serve tough enough. But those guys were so dynamic. Sometimes it just didn't matter.
yeah.
But that was it.
Yep.
Like it must have been the most boring match to watch because my blocks started over there and we know exactly where the ball's going. And it just became one-on-one volleyball, or one-on-two volleyball or one-on-three volleyball. We would set three blockers. We were so tiny, it didn't matter sometimes.
Yeah.
But
And I
that's
mean, I know that people are in it for the towels.
oh, dude, I just had
Well,
that conversation the other day. So, who was it? Was it Mason? It was one of the guys I was talking with, and they're like, "Dude, we just won, and we got this dinky hat." And I was like, "Dude, it's all about towels. Like
all about
winners
towels.
are for towels." And that because you and I have played, it was sand league. It was it 4-on-4.
Plenty of sand leagues. It was fours. Yeah, it was
Yeah, and
fours.
it was like 3 solid years we had a
Oh,
team
at least.
together.
Yeah,
Maybe
at
more,
least.
5 or 6.
It might have gone five, but it was, yeah, it was more than three. We played for a while there.
We had to get those
Yeah.
victories over off in the woods. I won't say it the other way
Um,
because
no comment.
but yeah, I started whining because if you get to know me long enough as you do, I start whining about stuff and like, man, I don't want your shorts. I don't want
Well, I got tired of towels. It was like, okay, I had enough towels. I need something else. But
winners are for
you loved
towels
the
are
towel.
for winners.
You were like,
It's all
yep,
about it.
towel. The year
And
that
by the way, oh, go ahead.
backpacks. We were all excited about getting backpacks, the year of backpacks, and you were like, "Nah, I just want a towel." It's
Small
like, all
towel.
right, take your towel.
Winners are for towels. And you are so gracious. You've worked both my ResV matches for a
Oh
plate of
yes.
wings, which is unbelievable. Like you are
Well,
just a sweetheart for that.
well,
Um,
then it's I. You know that I enjoy watching good volleyball, and while it's certainly disjointed, there's a obvious amount of talent there to watch those games, and it was great this year to have a ladies game as well.
yeah.
The ladies, watching them play, anybody who knows volleyball knows it's two very different games in some respects. The
Hmm.
guys are just going to go out there and just try and hit it as hard as they can, and the girls
Mm,
are much smarter in trying to, when they're hitting it hard, they're hitting it with a purpose.
right.
So,
Right.
um,
Yeah. No, I was really pleased because Steve Simmons was, after the first one was like, you got to do a girls one. And I was
yeah,
like, all right, well, I'll give it a shot. I don't, I referee a little bit, so I see some of the girls' sides, but I don't know that world as well because I knew the boys because I've been doing club for a couple of years now, and a lot of the good players from Rhode Island are playing on that team, so I knew all those guys already. So it was real easy for me to just pluck them out and say, all right, these are who I think is the best players in the state. We're going to have this tournament. It's going to be, I mean, this match, it's going to be great. more challenging with the women. I've needed much more help from coaches and other people in the state to kind of give me, hey, this girl's really good, or this young lady's really outstanding, you should have her. And what's the difference between this player and this player, and who's better, who's worse? Because when you're only picking 26 or 27 kids, like, to invite, it's challenging, and you want to get it right. Number one. Number two, you always know there's a slight emotional component to it that, maybe, and for, by the way, for the boys as well, hey, I've had people message me, why wasn't I on the list? And I'm like, no comment, man. Like,
Yeah,
I'm doing the
gotta,
best I
gotta,
can. Come be a fan. That's
yeah.
all I can do.
Yep.
But yeah, you've been a sweetheart and working both those for a plate of wings, because
It's
I
been
know that's,
great.
yeah, no, really, really appreciate that. All right, man. Well, it didn't hurt too much, did it?
Didn't hurt too much. I still, I don't know. I feel like you've run out of gas, but okay.
No, 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 no. You were high on my list. I can
Oh,
show you
good.
the list. I have it on my iPad right now if you want to see it.
No,
And
no, no, no. I'm afraid to see who's on the list.
I get people that I think are important, and you're
Listen.
up there.
I'm just happy that when all of this ends, it's one of the few things that I can say that I did that Nancy Samara also did, because there's nothing that you can say that she's done that I've also done. So
Well,
I'm
you were better. You went live on camera. I mean,
oh,
we had just used just a picture for her, because she was not going live on camera. I think she was traveling at the time, and of course,
oh, okay.
Nancy. She's incredibly
Yeah,
busy. She's
oh,
always
geez.
moving from one spot to the next, and I was very happy and grateful that she gave me some time, because
Yeah.
I think she's a wonderful person to talk about with volleyball. She just knows
Oh,
so
yeah.
much.
Oh God. I mean, please. She's seen it all. That's the thing.
Well, the
It's
funny thing was, not to cut you off, but the funny thing was that when I told her what I thought of her, she was really, like, taken aback that I felt that way. And I was like,
wow.
really? Like, if you watch the interview, maybe you get a chance to at some point. There's a time where I'm talking about how I think, one of her greatest strengths that I try to be better, I wanted to be better at once I got to work with her and talk with her, was the ability to give information that's very complex in a simplistic matters that
Oh,
athletes can execute. She's
oh, she's
tremendous at it.
phenomenal at it.
Yeah, and so I
Phenomenal.
brought that up. I was like, and she's like, I'm hearing. She said something on the lines of, "I'm hearing you say that, but it's not how I see it." And I'm like, "Really?"
It's oh
Like,
gosh. I mean, I have been with her at a certain establishment, and
mhm.
she has gone over things using salt and pepper shakers
Yeah,
to show where people are moving. And you look at it and you're like, how are you making that so simple?
yeah.
And it just, yeah, I mean, it really is astonishing. I mean, when we hired her, she and I were at a Johnson Wales event, and I told her how intimidating it was. And I don't think a lot of her athletes realized how good the level that she played at
Oh
and
yeah,
how good she was
yeah.
when she was playing at that time. I mean, she's just
I, I
another
remember
level.
being in the I remember being in the room for the hiring squad for her,
Yeah. Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
and as soon as she left, I threw my little notepad,
yeah.
and Jamie's there and someone else, and they're like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Well, dude, this is just me, but way better." Like, what? It's time for me to go.
Why are we even debating this? I know it was astonishing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then it showed with what she did. It was yeah, it was
Yeah,
amazing.
I want to write an article about that, about how, the Samaras came to Rhode Island and really brought the volleyball level in Rhode Island up to this peak
Yeah,
where, Johnson Wales was ranked in the top five. And certainly, don't discount that Ben made Roger Williams like a high level competitor
yeah,
beforehand.
yeah,
And then he went to Wesleyan and created a monster as well. But also Miley being a part of, Barrington and winning a couple of state championships or whatever it was. It was funny. She brought that up. Miley brought Barrington high too, and I said, yeah, but it doesn't stick out to me mainly because, well, it was only what 4 or 5 years ago when the kid from North Carolina showed up and
Oh
did it
yeah,
with
yeah,
LaSalle. So it wasn't like as shocking to me because it had already been done about 5 or 6 years ago.
yeah,
uh, but still, the Samaras showed up, and volleyball everywhere in Rhode Island became pretty high level. In fact, the only team that didn't benefit from the Samara rise really is URI. Like
yeah,
URI sort of didn't, Steve had what, a year or two before they went with a different guy, and then the other guy didn't work, and Angel's fighting over there right now to get the get the train going on the tracks again. But everyone else, Brown's playing really good volleyball. PC was seeing the best levels they had ever seen,
yep.
that I can recall anyway. I'm sure there are levels that I didn't see prior, but um,
To think that Miley came in and was the starting outside on her 18-1s team when she was only 14
yeah,
is,
there you go. That's enough.
I mean,
Yeah,
she was
yeah,
she was a little kid and she was crushing it, you know, and when you've got that kid, you can go places with your club, and they
right.
did because she could get them there. So,
Yeah. And I
but
think she's got is she over 1,200 digs at Yale? Like she's
I believe she just broke the record, but I don't know the number.
yeah, yeah. And I recently, I'm sure you may have heard, but I'm one of the broadcasters for Brown Volleyball. I do the color commentary with Scott Kardashian, and it's I haven't seen the Yale match, and I'm actually going to miss it because I'll be in Mexico this week coming up, so I'll miss the other Yale match. But that's where it's going to end, is between Brown and Yale, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Although Princeton's pretty darn good. Princeton beat Brown in four at Brown, and they're all freshmen, which is pretty wild. Like, they have a really young crew. But yeah, Miley's leading the charge over there. So yeah, I think that's an article that needs to be written about how the Samaros came in and changed volleyball in Rhode Island. And now that they've gone, like, everything's sort of settled back down.
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
there it is. All right, Mr. Segee, I'm going to let you off early. You're lucky. Normally,
Oh, I appreciate it. It's been wonderful, and I look forward to our next round of margaritas.
oh, tomorrow? No.
Sure.
Thank you so much, sir. Really
Uh,
appreciate it. Stay well, and yeah, we'll talk soon.
all right. Awesome.